Hey everybody, welcome to Dad's Den of Pop Culture and the final Werewolf movie review of October 2025. Tonight we're going to be looking at I Was a Teenage Werewolf from 1957 from American International Pictures, frankly, a drive-in movie hit. The budget was $123,000. It did $2 million in box office. In today's money, that would be like a $1.4 million budget, $23.5 million box office. So pretty profitable movie overall. We're going to go through this film. We're going to look at some scenes, stills of scenes, talk about the plot, talk about the characters, get a few other ideas in there. And of course, there are going to be spoilers in this one, so be forewarned. So we begin with the universal emblem of, oh, what the heck am I about to watch? I'm joking, of course, but American International, like I said, really had a winner on their hands with this one. They made, a lot of B movies, but some of them turn out to be really entertaining. And from the get-go, this is different from those 40s Universal werewolf pictures. You get a jazzy saxophone solo for the credits instead of the kind of theme they're used to in old horror movies. Other films had done this sort of thing, of course, but I just wanted to point out the difference between this film and the other werewolf movies that I've reviewed this month. So I'm not saying that it's the first movie that ever used a jazzy soundtrack, but kind of different for a monster movie. Also, think about this title. I Was a Teenage Werewolf. The I Was sort of title was big in these days. I was a communist for the FBI. I was a shoplifter. I accused my parents, so it's really fitting itself into, stuff that kids at the time were aware of, kind of an exploitation vibe, maybe not to the extent you'd get in the 70s exploitation films, but know what I mean. Of course, our star in this one is Michael Landon, an early role for him. He's going to go on to star in Bonanza for 14 years, then Little House on the Prairie for 9 years, and finally, Highway to Heaven for another 5. Had an amazing career on television. We'll talk about the other players as we go along through the film. Ralph Thornton wrote the original story and screenplay, except the real folks behind it were actually Herman Cohen, the producer of B movies, who also wrote I Was a Teenage Frankenstein and How to Make a Monster, and Aben Candle. Now, Joseph Lachelle is our director of photography. He won an Academy Award for Laura, a very classic film noir. For this one, maybe not so much, but the guy knows his business. Our director is Gene Fowler Jr. Guy had a lot of editing credits, including It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, Hang 'em High, A Man Called Horse, and the 1981 Ringo Starr classic Caveman. No, seriously, it's a funny movie. I mean, it's funny. It's funny, trust me. But this one, he is actually directing rather than editing, so let's see how he does. We open at Rockdale High School and a fight. Tony Rivers, Michael Landon, is getting the tar beaten out of him, but he won't quit. He won't stay down. It's kind of like Marty McFly, right? And also not that different from Little Joe that he played on Bonanza. At one point, he grabs a shovel and takes a couple swings at the kid, which is really bad form, and he even does the dirt in the eyes bit. So, I mean, this guy, he don't want to lose, and he obviously has, some anger issues. Well, before it can get any worse, the cops show up and pull them apart. So we've learned, really right off the bat, that Tony is a hothead. He overreacts. He won't accept an apology for a friendly slap on the back, etc. Basic misunderstood teenage miscreant of drive-in cinema. Detective Sergeant Donovan here is played by the great Barney Phillips, a fixture of B movies and TV shows of the period. You might recognize him as the alien in the Will the Real Martian Please Stand Up episode of Twilight Zone, and he played Sergeant Ed Jacobs on Dragnet. Well, he gets the kids to shake hands, and Tony lightens up for a moment, but still ends up storming off, angry. That's right, hide behind jive talk. People bug you. Well, people bug me too, but I don't go around clouding everybody. Love the delivery there, and I love the line. He basically warns Tony that he's headed for an arrest if he doesn't cut it out. Again, this is pretty standard stuff for teenage movies of the period. And honestly, now, if they're still making them, I'm sure it's not that different. He suggests that Tony sees a Dr. Brandon. He's been helping counsel troubled teens. He's modern. He uses hypnosis. Tony has no interest whatsoever in a head shrinker. No, sir. Well, Tony's next trick is to yell at the only person who seems to give a crap about him, at least at this point, his girlfriend, Arlene Logan, played by Yvonne Lime. Lime did a few movies, but she then married producer Dan Feddersen and became a philanthropist. So just a short career in film. Well, Tony quickly apologizes to her because, we need to like this kid. We need to root for him a little bit. You can't make him just a complete, b-hole. It's not going to work. Well, since we're on our last werewolf film of the month, I think it's worth comparing our werewolves. So Henry Hall in Werewolf of London was obsessed. Lon Chaney Jr. was easygoing. Nina Foch was just plain evil, and June Lockhart was an innocent. So now we got a werewolf with anger issues, and that's kind of new. But he does describe here that he really does lose control. He's not happy about what's happening to him. So to continue with the humanizing of Tony, we see him at home. Dad is a hardworking guy, but a single parent. Tony greets him warmly, and Dad does the same. So it doesn't look like Tony comes from a bad home or anything. But maybe the lack of a mother influences an explanation a little bit for the anger issues. Well, Dad tells him the principal called, and Tony is angry that his dad was brought into this. He really wants to handle his problems on his own. I mean, he's doing a great job so far. And Dad drops a little wisdom about sometimes you just have to do things the way other people want, so they'll leave you alone. Go along to get along. Well, Dad has to go to work. He works a night shift. There's some lamb chops in the fridge. Make sure you cook them. Don't eat them raw like you did the hamburger last night. Maybe foreshadowing. But when Dad is gone, Tony throws a bottle of milk at the wall. He's just so angry about everything. He is just consumed by rage, and he does not know how to stop it. Well, since this is a teen movie, we need to hit certain points. Up next is Tony meeting with Arlene's parents, and it goes really, really well. Now, in his defense, Arlene's dad was being a bit of a jerk to him, and Tony held it together pretty well for the most part. But importantly, though, they mentioned that tonight is Halloween, and there's going to be a midnight curfew for him and Arlene going out on the town. When Tony and Arlene get outside, she mentions Dr. Brandon again, really wants him to go, and he makes sure she understands. He will never go to a doctor like that, no matter what. Man, she puts up with a lot of crap from this kid. He's not even little Joe yet. Well, they end up at this party. There's music, there's dancing, there's necking, everything that a kid likes. There's even some really terrible bongo playing and some kind of sad attempts at comedy and the requisite live performance here by Kenny Miller. I think he does the best he can with what he was given for this movie. Now, as crazy as this might sound, Tony gets into a fight at the party. You see, they start playing pranks, and Vic, Kenny Miller, wants to get back for getting doused with water. So he sneaks up behind Tony. Really brilliant move, since I think they all kind of know about his anger issues. And he blows a horn in his ear. And when Arlene tries to break it up, Tony shoves her away and she lands on the floor. That kind of stuns him a little bit. The kids are shocked. Arlene is shocked. Tony just can't believe what he's done. Vic was annoying, though, and he did poke the bear, so, Vic kind of got what was coming to him. It is this incident which finally sends Tony to Dr. Brandon, played by Whit Bissell, veteran actor of film and television. The treatment he provides involves hypnotism and a mild sedative. Tony's a little nervous about it, but he drinks the stuff that he's given. But we soon learn that Brandon and his assistant, Dr. Hugo Wagner, have other plans than hypnotism. They prepare a mixture of scopolamine and some serum the doctor is working on. Hugo is not real wild about this. He says, "But you're sacrificing a human life. Do you cry over a guinea pig? The boy's a free police case. We're probably saving him from the gas chamber." So this is your normal mad scientist, really, when you get down to it. But I like the way it's integrated with juvenile delinquency in this film. You have, what do they call it? Mashups, right? This is a mashup, basically, of the angsty teen film and the mad scientist horror movie put together, and it actually works pretty well. And you also, because of the way they're doing it, you get this kid who does not like or trust authority, about to be betrayed by a doctor he has gone to for help. I mean, he's actually trusting this guy, and he's going to get betrayed. Well, the doctor explains that Tony has the proper disturbed emotional background for his experiment. So he's in, whether he likes it or not. The plan is to regress him back through hypnosis and the serum to a primitive state. This will transform him and unleash the savage instincts that lie within him, which honestly you can already do just by, touching him on the back or blowing a horn next to his head. So what's the point of all this? Well, mankind is on the verge of destroying itself. So the only hope is to hurl us back to our primitive beginnings and start all over again. Basically to de-evolve us to, just wild creatures. What's one life compared to such a triumph, he asks. Man, even Dr. Doofenshmirtz never came up with a doozy like this one. Well, they go ahead with the hypnosis, and Tony tells a story about beating up a kid who stole a toy from him. And that's actually it for now. They actually do a nice job, I thought, here of tempting you with a transformation here and then abruptly ending the session. Nice bit of teasing. Tony continues going to these treatments, though, with the sessions getting more intense and the serum doses getting bigger as well. Brandon encourages him to be violent, to revel in violence and bloodletting while he's under hypnosis. Dude's a real sick twist. Bissell does a really good job with the role, I thought. Even though he's, doing the mad scientist bit, he doesn't let his performance go too far. He's not giving giant, crazy monologues. He kind of keeps it real. Landon is a bit more intense with his performance, but then he's supposed to be doing kind of the James Dean, rebel without a cause bit, so it works. I mean, he's supposed to be a little more intense. Well, it all comes to a head at the hangout one night. As the gang heads home, one kid, Frank, decides he'll walk home on his own through the woods, which of course is prime wolf territory. Just ask Little Red Riding Hood, she knows. Tony drops Arlene at home and then apparently heads out to do some hunting. As Frank walks through the dark, he begins hearing footfalls behind him. He starts running, he falls down. They really stretch this scene out quite a bit, ramping up the tension. It's done pretty well. Good camera work, the music works well here as well. And then, well, we don't see what old Frank sees, but we can imagine. As often happens, the mangled body of the teenager draws the interest of the police department. You get the standard, looks like an animal attack bit that we get in werewolf movies, but there are no wild animals around here, so it's a weird explanation. More importantly, it brings Sergeant Donovan back into the picture. The dialogue here and delivery is actually very reminiscent of Dragnet. In the end, the chief wants to keep things quiet to avoid panic. Donovan is to ask around any carnivals, private menageries, maybe a farm dog that's gotten loose, but avoid rumors to the best of his ability. I also want to highlight that police officer Chris Stanley in this scene is none other than Guy Williams, who will be playing Zorro for Disney very soon after this movie was released. Now, he has a little confab with the janitor, Peppy, played by Vladimir Sokolov, shows him the pictures of the crime scene, which really probably shouldn't do. When Peppy sees him, he immediately declares that the boy was killed by a werewolf. You see, his home village is in the Carpathians, and he's seen some stuff. Officer Stanley, of course, thinks this is nonsense. When are police ever going to learn to jump to outrageous conclusions when they're suggested by colorful ethnic types in movies? When? How many more people have to die? Well, when Tony shows up for his next appointment early, he has something disturbing to relate to Dr. Brandon. Of course, Brandon is excited about the news of the murder. He suspects his experiment is working. Tony is just freaked out. He had this nightmare that seemed very real about killing Frank. The police, meanwhile, are completely stumped. Well, we next catch up with high school gymnast Teresa, played by Dawn Richard, Playboy Playmate of the Month for May of 1957, training in the gym. Now, you would think being in Playboy would keep you maybe out of movies and TV in the 1950s. Like, oh, it's terrible. Not really so much. David Nelson, Ozzie and Harriet's son, married a Miss January 1957, and she appeared in episodes of Ozzie and Harriet. Joan Staley from The Ghost and Mr. Chicken was Miss November 1958. So it really, at that point, Playboy was maybe a little bit less than it was going to become, but it wasn't the scandal you would assume it would have been in the 1950s. Well, the coach leaves her there to train alone. Tony happens to be late at school to meet with the principal. She's very happy with the improvement that he's been showing. So he leaves the meeting very happy, and on the way out, he sees Teresa training, and he stops to watch. And while standing by the wall of the gym, the bell above his head rings, just loud as all get out. And this starts his transformation. And it's the first transformation we're actually going to get to see on screen. We get the wavy picture that cycles quickly through the different stages of the werewolf makeup, and of course lands on the finale. Not bad when you consider the budget that they had, and essentially the way that this kind of thing they would do it in Hollywood until they had the morphing type technology in the 1990s. And this is maybe not the best choice at this juncture. The gymnast is hanging upside down when Teen Wolf approaches, so we get this shot that's like from her point of view upside down. I think it kind of injects a little goofiness into a moment that really isn't goofy. We then get her scream, and then again we see him upside down. Just not sure that's the best way to go. Well, ultimately he chases her around the gym, and the principal overhears the screaming and investigates, and soon others are running for the gym. And honestly, this is pretty good makeup here. I like the really funky looking teeth. And of course, this was some inspiration for the classic Michael Jackson Thriller video, down to kind of wearing a similar jacket. Well, a few people witnessed the attack, which was about as brutal as you could pull off back in 1957. And then Teen Wolf runs through the crowd and escapes, but they recognize him based on his clothing. The police show up, they start questioning, while Teen Wolf flees through the countryside. So the police cordon off the area to hem him in. Recreational areas are shut down. A posse is forming to hunt him down. We get a confrontation between the police captain and the press. Blame, they want to see the photos, etc., just what you kind of expect from the press. Donovan interviews Dr. Brandon. He thinks it's mass psychosis. Doesn't believe it, of course. And of course, nobody's turning into a werewolf. Although, of course, he does know it's absolutely true. He says Tony was doing fine under his care, didn't notice anything wrong. Brandon plays it pretty cool throughout the scene, but Donovan suspects that something is up. Well, by this time, night has fallen, and Tony is still on the run. The press stops by Arlene's house. Dad doesn't seem too bothered to have his picture taken. He seems like maybe he kind of likes this attention. Tony's dad just can't believe that, this can all be true. You basically get to see how people are reacting to the tragedy and the idea of a real werewolf running around this town. Dad's a really good guy. You really feel for him, and it's played very well. The press, of course, comes off pretty terrible as usual, folks. Outside of movies that are made specifically to lionize journalism, does the press ever come off good in a movie? Just think about that. Well, the posse finally gets together and heads out. Naturally, this involves torches. One old guy gets separated, is almost attacked. Not quite, though. It is then that Teen Wolf smells something. It turns out to be a German Shepherd, and that leads to a noisy fight. And of course, it was a German Shepherd that Lon Chaney Jr. fought in The Wolfman. It was his own dog, in fact. I think, though, the main problem throughout this whole bit is that things are stretched and they are padded. It's a common problem with B movies needing more, film than they really had script. So this bit could be a little more tense, could be a little bit more exciting. Just kind of rolls and rolls and rolls. Well, ultimately, Teen Wolf wins the fight. So yes, the dog, you get it. But I mean, he started it technically. So that's how it goes. Just like Vic. The next morning, Tony awakens a human again, but he's aware of what has happened and thus is still on the run. He's trying to avoid the police. He makes his way into town and heads for Dr. Brandon's. And I have a sneaking suspicion the doctor is not going to like it when he actually gets there. Well, as he walks down the street, Tony spies a phone booth, but he's prevented from immediately crossing across the street by a motorcycle cop who's pulling over a driver. Will he be recognized? He risks it, and midway across, the cop yells at him. But it's just because he's jaywalking. He finally gets to the phone, calls Arlene, who's waiting anxiously for word, from him. She's nervous, though, because the police are in her living room, also waiting for this call. They want her to hold him long enough to trace the call. She answers, hello? And Tony says nothing, probably not knowing what to say. And then a guy shows up waiting for the phone, and Tony just hangs up and leaves. So they don't manage to trace the call. But Tony was spotted while he was out on the street. Sergeant Donovan gets a call. He's at 10th and Hudson, so he heads off just as Tony arrives at Dr. Brandon's. Tony is freaked out. He's looking for help once again, not guessing that Brandon is the author of all of his troubles. Landon goes a little overboard here, but I think it actually still works for the kind of movie it is and for, of course, the situation he's in. I mean, he's desperate. He's turning into a werewolf, for crying out loud. Brandon, again, plays everything really cool, sits him down, then heads into the laboratory for more serum so he can cause the change one more time. He wants to actually see this. He wants to revel in his triumph. Wagner pleads with him to help the boy instead, but no, he's just utterly cold. Well, he gets his wish, and we know what they say about being careful what you wish for. Tony indeed does transform right before his eyes. He's happy, and then a phone rings, a loud noise, and it sets Tony off. Hugo is attacked first, and the film that he was taking of the transformation is exposed, so it's ruined. There's not going to be any proof here. Brandon runs into the lab and grabs an antidote, turning around to see Tony stalking him. He pleads, Tony, I'm your friend. I'm the only friend you've got. But Tony isn't convinced. He keeps coming step by step, inch by inch. And then he strikes. As Brandon is taken down to the ground, Donovan and Stanley bust down the outer door and see what remains of Hugo. They hear growling. They then see Tony heading for them. 3 shots. He goes down to one knee, but then keeps on coming until 2 more shots take him down for good. And of course, once dead, he returns to his normal human self. And Donovan says, well, at least they'll see him this way now. The newspapers will just eat this up. Yeah, but after they've had their field day, one thing will be clear. It's not for man to interfere in the ways of God. Not the cheeriest ending you could get, but on par with most werewolf movies. I Was a Teenage Werewolf is a pretty good B movie, but it does suffer from the normal B movie problems. They have to stretch things. They have to pad things a little bit. There's some slow parts. The acting overall is pretty good. A lot of TV actors, and they knew what they were doing. And I think the story holds together. It's not a complex story, but I think it holds together as much as it needs to. Werewolf, makeup is pretty decent. The special effects aren't, they're not terrible. Overall, I like this movie. I think it's pretty good. Well, 5 weeks, 5 werewolf movies. We have seen a nice guy succumb to a terrible curse in The Wolf Man, a driven scientist get into trouble, venturing into a valley of demons, a servant of the devil killing off those who stood in the way of her tribe, an innocent girl manipulated by an evil woman, and finally a high school hothead betrayed by a mad scientist. I think it's a really interesting array of people cursed with lycanthropy. And I think it's a sign that Werewolves offer some pretty good story possibilities. The wolf half is going to be savage and dangerous, but the human half can vary widely. And it's the way the person reacts to what they're going through and what's happening that can really, that a writer can really have fun with. Well, I'm glad I took this trip through werewolfery, as they said in Werewolf of London. I'd seen all of these films before, but never one after the other. And in doing so, I think I learned a lot about the concept of werewolves in these old movies. I hope you enjoyed these reviews, and I hope you have a great Halloween. It's just a few days away. So I will end this as I always do. Let's take the spoilers down. God bless everybody. Please be kind to one another. Have a little bit of fun out there. Don't go nuts on the Halloween candy, but indulge a little bit. And I will hopefully see you again soon in Dad's Den of Pop Culture. Bye-bye.